The warning signs were always there. In the sharp words of a 10-year-old revolutionary with a frown deeper than his years, the Boondocks delivered lessons about survival, power, and the traps of a system built to keep people in line. Huey Freeman was the voice of reason in a neighborhood obsessed with distractions, violence, and quick money. Week after week, the show placed him at the center of chaos, where he often saw more clearly than the adults around him. And boy, did he call it out. From government surveillance to consumer culture, from racial stereotypes to the machinery of mass media, he taught survival not just in the physical sense, but in the mental one. He understood that without awareness, no amount of struggle would matter. Yet most of the time, his lessons went unheard. His family dismissed him as paranoid. His neighbors brushed him off as uptight. And we, the audience, laughed, missing the blade hidden in the comedy. In this video, we'll break down the 5 survival codes Huey laid out, told through the episodes that made them unforgettable. This is the story of what Huey Freeman tried to teach us about surviving in a world built to control and exploit. Hit subscribe for more media breakdowns like this one, and let's get started. Huey Freeman's first survival lesson was about narratives and the way they shape reality. In the Boondocks, he exposed how media, whether through television, radio, or news coverage, functions as a tool of influence. The stories people consume guide what they believe, how they react, and even what they ignore. Once a version of events is repeated often enough, it becomes accepted as truth, even if it hides the actual situation. The clearest example appeared in episode 2 of season 1, The Trial of R. Kelly. Outside the courthouse, the atmosphere looked less like a legal proceeding and more like a block party. Crowds danced, waved signs, and chanted in defense of the singer. The accusations of abuse, which should have sparked outrage and a demand for accountability, were treated as background noise. Fans treated the moment as entertainment, turning the trial into a spectacle rather than a search for justice. Huey stood apart, isolated in his frustration. He was one of the only voices reminding people of the seriousness of the charges and the reality of the victims. But his warnings fell flat. The crowd, lost in celebration and loyalty to a celebrity, had no interest in facing the truth. Even the media encouraged the circus by focusing on the drama instead of the crimes, feeding into the narrative that the event was a cultural showdown rather than a question of justice. The lesson was bigger than one artist. Huey recognized that this was how systems of power manipulate communities, by turning serious issues into distractions. The public believed they were choosing freely to support someone they admired, but in reality, they were following a script written by loyalty, sensational coverage, and emotional spin. The more people rallied around the distraction, the less pressure there was to confront the corruption beneath it. Huey's code of survival here was straightforward. Question every story that is fed to you. Ask why some cases dominate headlines while others disappear without a trace. Look at who benefits when an event is turned into a show and who suffers when the truth is buried under noise. The first step toward freedom is protecting yourself from being shaped by someone else's narrative. Surrendering that meant giving up the ability to see reality with your own eyes. And this warning about narratives leads directly into Huey's second survival code: resisting illusions. Once you see how stories are shaped, the harder decision is whether to face reality or surrender to lies because they're convenient. Many people choose illusions because they feel easier to live with. But many times, illusions aren't harmless distractions, they're traps. Season 1's finale, The Passion of Reverend Ruckus, pushed this lesson to its limit. After dreaming of white heaven, Uncle Ruckus began preaching that salvation could only be found by rejecting blackness and embracing whiteness. He filled arenas with people applauding a message that degraded their own identity. The illusion worked because it let them ignore the real struggle. If salvation came through whiteness, then their suffering wasn't the system's fault. Believing this meant they no longer had to confront injustice. they could explain it away as something they deserved. At the same time, Huey was focused on saving his friend Shabazz, a man on death row despite overwhelming evidence of his innocence. Huey risked his own life with a desperate plan, knowing the system was too corrupt to care about the truth. The contrast could not have been sharper. Ruckus offered the comfort of fantasy. Accept your inferiority, conform, and maybe you'll be rewarded. Huey offered awareness of how the world really worked, even though awareness required sacrifice and the courage to face pain head-on. Huey's survival code here was blunt. Illusions that promise comfort or salvation weaken you because they make oppression feel justified. They let you explain away your suffering instead of fighting it. Huey's refusal to accept fantasy, even when it meant risking death, was his way of showing that survival depends on rejecting lies designed to break you from within. Huey's warning about illusions leads into his third survival code, knowing that oppression doesn't always come from where you expect it. Huey showed us that oppression is sometimes disguised as opportunity, kindness, or business deals. The system can exploit you without firing a shot. It can trick you into signing away your freedom with a smile. This message came through in Season 1, Episode 14, The Block is Hot. On the surface, it was a simple story about Jasmine opening a lemonade stand during a freak winter heat wave. But when Ed Wunkler the first appeared, the story turned into a lesson about contracts, debt, and the way capitalism preys on innocence. Wunkler offered Jasmine a pony in exchange for selling lemonade under his control. The contract was full of hidden conditions. Every upgrade to the stand came with costs that ate away her profits. By the end, Jasmine wasn't closer to owning her pony. She was trapped in debt, working harder for less while Wunkler collected everything. Huey saw it from the start and tried to warn her. He recognized Wunkler's tactics as the same strategies used by corporations and landlords: lure people with promises, then bind them with obligations they don't fully understand. What looked like help was actually a system of exploitation. The real danger wasn't the police beating Uncle Ruckus in the street. It was Wunkler, smiling as he turned a child into a laborer under the illusion of reward. Huey's survival code here was simple. Never assume oppression only comes from authority figures carrying weapons. Exploitation often hides in everyday deals, jobs, or contracts that seem harmless at first glance. To survive, you have to read the fine print, question the terms, and recognize when someone is profiting from your hard work. Huey was teaching that the system doesn't always take by force. It often takes by tricking you into giving consent. And this warning about hidden exploitation also aligns with Huey's fourth survival code: discipline in the face of anger. Once you understand how the system works, through narratives, illusions, and economic traps, the natural reaction is rage. But Huey made it clear that rage without direction is exactly what the system wants. Chaos creates the excuse for tighter control, harsher policing, and the dismissal of real grievances. This was illustrated in Episode 11 of Season 1, Let's Nab Oprah. Ed Wunkler III and Gin Rummy dragged Riley into one of their reckless schemes, this time plotting to kidnap Oprah Winfrey. The plan wasn't born out of strategy or resistance. It was pure ego mixed with fantasy. They wanted the thrill of taking down someone powerful, but they had no preparation, no discipline, and no sense of the consequences. From the start, the operation was doomed. Their mistakes piled up quickly. They kidnapped Maya Angelou by accident, proving they weren't even paying attention to who they were targeting. They stormed into a studio without a clear plan and ended up fighting with security. At one point, they even considered abducting Bill Cosby, not out of intent, but sheer stupidity. Every step turned the plan into a parody of rebellion, loud, chaotic, and ultimately pointless. Huey, sensing what was happening, tried to intervene before things spiraled further. He tracked down the plot and attempted to stop them, but his path led to a brutal fight with Bushido Brown, Oprah's legendary bodyguard. While Ed, Rummy, and Riley stumbled through their idiotic plan, Huey was left bloodied, realizing too late that their chaos had achieved nothing but embarrassment. In the end, the entire scheme collapsed under its own weight. For Huey, this kind of reckless violence was exactly what the system wanted. Riley's obsession with proving toughness through crime created more evidence for authorities to point to as justification for repression. Instead of challenging power, the chaos gave power an excuse to dismiss them as criminals and fools. Their random violence didn't expose injustice. It only covered it up with more noise. Huey's survival code here was sharp. Violence without purpose is a trap. Outbursts of rage don't frighten the system. Instead, they strengthen it. What the system actually fears is organized, intentional resistance built on clarity and discipline. Huey wanted us to see that anger itself wasn't the problem. The danger was in letting anger run wild without vision, because then it becomes nothing more than entertainment for those already in control. Huey's warning about reckless violence leads us to his final survival code. The true fight is always in the mind. Systems of control can use force, contracts, or illusions. But the easiest victory comes when people stop thinking critically. If you surrender mentally, resistance ends before it even begins. This was clear from the very first episode, The Garden Party. Huey dreaded attending the wealthy Wunkler family's celebration, calling it sipping tea with the enemy. When he finally tried to speak his truth, pointing out uncomfortable realities about race, power, and corruption, the crowd wasn't moved in the slightest. In that moment, he realized the richest people in Woodcrest didn't care what was true. Their wealth insulated them from consequences, and no amount of truth could break through that barrier. This indifference could have left Huey in despair, but he never allowed himself to lose focus. His strength came from maintaining clarity even when no one listened. Across the series, whether dealing with Riley's chaos, Ruckus's sermons, or the community's misplaced loyalty, Huey refused to let the environment dictate his state of mind. His stoicism was his way of survival. He understood that despair, panic, or self-hatred were all tools that made control easier. Huey's final survival code was absolute. Protect your mind at all costs. Don't let illusions define your worth. Don't let distractions steal your focus, and don't allow hopelessness to take root. Survival wasn't about avoiding the struggle. It was about refusing to let the struggle rewrite who you are. Huey Freeman was a 10-year-old revolutionary, but his lessons carried the weight of centuries. Through 5 survival codes, the Boondocks revealed how systems of power keep people in line. By controlling stories, selling illusions, disguising exploitation, rewarding reckless violence, and attacking the mind. Huey stood against all of it, even when no one listened. He was the rare voice insisting that awareness, discipline, and clarity were weapons as essential as any fist or firearm. Most of the time, his family brushed him off. His neighbors laughed. Even the audience often treated his warnings as comedy. But that was the genius of the character. Huey's words slipped through the humor to leave marks on anyone paying attention. He wasn't teaching how to win overnight. All along, he was teaching how to survive a world designed to wear you down from within. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you hit that subscribe button for more deep dives into shows, culture, and the hidden lessons they carry. Share this video with someone who grew up on the Boondocks, or anyone who needs a reminder of Huey Freeman's powerful messages. And let us know in the comments which Huey moment stuck with you the most. Thanks for watching. This is Black Wealth Uncut, and we'll see you in the next one.